religious tension, political ambition, and a struggle for the French throne. This was the civil war that tore France apart, engulfed much of Europe, and left 3 million dead. These were the French wars of religion. In the 14th century, France was considered the centre of Europe. They had just emerged from England's defeat in the 100 Years' War and their defeat in the Italian Wars. France was one of the most powerful countries in Europe. 2 clergymen were fed up with this situation and determined to change it: John Calvin and Martin Luther. Luther was angry with the Catholic Church because he saw people paying the Church for salvation, which he believed was not only a corrupt theology, but was also corrupting the Church. 20 years later, Calvin seized this opportunity and put it into practice, teaching that not only can the Church save you, but that God has already decided whether you go to heaven or hell. But if you follow my teachings, others will follow. You may think you're going to heaven. This seemed perfectly logical to many, especially since the kings of France had the power to appoint bishops for their people, and many were not entirely interested in this, so Calvin began preaching his own version of Christianity in the 1530s. About 40 years later, Luther's influence on France reached its peak. Of France's 16 million people, 1.6 million were Protestants by the 1570s. However, the government, noticing this dramatic demographic shift, was not entirely satisfied and left it alone until the placard incident. On October 18, 1534, as people were going to church, placards mocking the idea of Catholic Mass and Communion were hung all over France. Someone hung a placard on the king's bedroom door while he slept. King Francis, seeing this as a threat to his life and authority, ordered the author burned at the stake outside Notre Dame Cathedral. If this religion had the power to incite people to such mockery of authority, it would have been easy to kill him. He continued to fight any suspected Protestant treason, and Calvin, a French Protestant, was forced to flee to Switzerland. It didn't stop there. Once freed from persecution, he began to influence French Protestants. John Calvin went from being a novice lawyer to the forefront of the French Reformation, becoming one of the most influential reformers in the world. This introduces me to the 3 main characters in this 30-year political chess game. The Valois and Bourbon were 2 of the most powerful families in France, with few soldiers, and both were staunch Catholics. The Bourbons were also 2 of the most powerful families in France, with few soldiers. The Valois, on the other hand, were the ruling family of France, seeking to maintain the stability of the kingdom and strike a balance between these 2 warring families. Although Calvin left France and Protestants were persecuted and massacred, the movement continued to spread even after Francis's death, especially as Calvin began converting some nobles to Protestantism, including a relative of the king, Duke Count Louis of Bourbon. However, the new king, Henry, was dissatisfied with all Protestants and their lack of adherence to his religion, which made them all secret rebels, and he burned more Protestants. When Henry died, his 14-year-old son became the next king. However, he was unable to rule properly and was too old to rule, so the Duke of Guise and his brother ruled in his place. Both were staunch Catholics, but the king was naive and weak, and Calvinist Huguenots were still being burned at the stake. Bourbon and some other Huguenots thought, why not kidnap him, arrest the Duke and his brother, and then convert the king to Protestantism? Well, what happens after the king is kidnapped? But while they were carrying out this plan, one of them got drunk in a local tavern and recounted the entire plot. The duped Duke of Louisville was arrested, 1,500 people were killed, but Louis was acquitted for lack of evidence and released. While they were all being beheaded, the king's mother watched from the crowd and didn't understand, or that so many people had risked their lives for this, and were so desperate to try to kidnap the king. Perhaps there was some Protestantism after all. This is where Catherine de' Medici's role came into play. She believed that all this persecution and killing of Protestants would not eliminate them, and given their attempt to kidnap the king, they would only grow more desperate and angry at the prospect of change. When the king died 9 months later, and her other son Charles became king at the age of 10, Catherine began to rule the country herself, realizing that after 30 years of persecution, people were still converting to Christianity, and that this persecution would not solve anything, but would likely make matters worse. She sat with them in a meeting. The meeting could be summarized as follows: how much blood would be shed until everyone did what they should have done from the beginning: sit down and talk. The council achieved nothing. It reached a dead end, and people still held fast to their beliefs. But, in an attempt to curb Protestant rebellions, Catherine passed legislation offering concessions to the Protestants, most of whom were Calvinists and Huguenots, allowing them to practice their religion openly outside the cities. Similarly, the Duke of Guise and his companions were on their way to attend Mass in the town of Huizet, when they saw a group of Huguenots in a barn that had been their church. His companions tried to enter the barn and began insulting them, so the Huguenots pushed them out. Things escalated, stones were thrown, and one of them slapped the Duke. The Duke became enraged and burned the barn with the Protestants inside. This brutal, inhuman, and barbaric act outraged many, including Louis of Bourbon. He and his friend Gaspard de Coligny issued a call to arms for Protestants to take up arms against the Catholics. Francis, Duke of Guise, began mobilizing his forces in Paris to fight the Huguenots. The Duke of Guise sent an army to the court to protect the king. With Louis Bond, who feared either aiding the army or being expelled, Guise declared the Huguenots enemies, and war broke out. The Bourbons and Protestants captured several cities, which Guise recaptured. However, Guise and some of the key leaders were later killed in battle. Neither side was able to win, and after Elizabeth I began invading France, everyone made peace to confront her. 2 wars broke out, but neither side was able to achieve a decisive victory, and the Protestants gained more freedom. However, Louis Bourbon was killed in one of these battles, and the new Huguenot leader was his friend, Gaspard de Coligny. After these wars, he was invited to court and became very close to the king. He then began to agree with the Huguenots on many matters, and a dispute arose between him and a Protestant queen, which the Catholics of Corbeau had to deal with. While everyone was celebrating after the wedding, a man shot Coligny through the window. We don't know who ordered it, or whether he acted alone. Coligny survived, but the Catholics at the wedding knew it would be bad. The Huguenots were trying to shoot us, thinking we had done it deliberately, and I didn't want to die unless we caught them first. Of course, nothing happened. This time we were able to eliminate the Huguenots once and for all. Some Catholics at the wedding party broke into the building where Coligny was staying and killed him and some of his friends. Then they threw him out of a window. They feared that the Protestants would revolt and begin supplying Catholics in Paris with weapons. This was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, and people in other cities began persecuting Protestants. 10,000 Protestants were killed in 3 days. The 2 main Protestant leaders were arrested, and Henry of Bourbon, the king's cousin, was killed. He was arrested at court and everyone, Catholics and moderate Protestants alike, including Elizabeth I, were horrified. Even Ivan the Terrible was shocked when he heard the news. The war resumed, but after Coligny's death, the Protestants needed to regroup. The king's brother marched with 28,000 troops to La Rochelle to besiege it, facing 2,000 civilians and 1,200 soldiers. This was easy. We could wipe out the Huguenots once and for all. Damn them, they won't surrender. I'm going to Poland to be the next king. I can't. I was asked to deal with this. Aren't there many Protestants in Poland? Yes, it's not in your best interest. Maybe you should just make peace with France, and then they'll accept you as their king. But when King Charles died, the man who had become King of Poland also became King of France. Henry returned, but he had no children, so Henry was next in line to succeed him. Navarre, one of the Protestant leaders at court at the time, corrupted the Catholics, so Henry of Guise formed the Catholic League. With the support of Philip II of Spain, they prevented Henry from ascending the throne, and their goal was to install his Catholic uncle as King of France. Henry, the current King of France, said, "I don't mind him being the next king. I just want peace in the kingdom and its rule." The Duke of Guise and the Catholic League said, "Well, I guess we'll fight you too." Henry of Bourbon fled the court, and the War of the Three Henrys broke out. King Henry and Henry of Bourbon were aware of this. Their numbers were smaller because the Catholic League was made up of a large number of Catholics from all over France. They didn't have as much money as Philip II, as their country was devastated by war. They tried to unite their forces to fight the Duke of Guise and his Catholic League, but King Henry, who was in the north, didn't have enough time to communicate with Henry of Bourbon, who was in the south. Henry, the Duke of Guise, deposed him in Paris, because there was no army in Paris except. The Catholic Leagues forced him to issue a law requiring all Protestant preachers to leave France within a month, and all Protestant civilians to leave within 6 months, convert to Christianity, or be killed. Meanwhile, Henry of Bourbon was still in southern France, and the king and the League sent an army to crush him. King Henry was still angry about Guise holding him hostage. He wanted to control the League and was worried that he would seize the throne if he were assassinated. Then Guise's brother assassinated the king, and then Charles Pope, the man the League wanted to be the next king, died. Everyone began arguing about who would be the next king. Because no one could agree on anything, many nobles stopped sending troops, and the situation remained unchanged. Henry of Bourbon advanced forcefully, defeating the Catholic League army in several battles at Courtois-Arques and Ivry. Then the siege of Paris began. If he captured Paris, he could claim it. He was set to become the next king, but Philip II of Spain refused. He sent an army to force Henry to retreat after a 3-year siege, but he failed to enter Paris. Henry Bourbon decided that Paris was Catholic, and the League wanted a Catholic king, so he would convert to Catholicism. Paris deserved the Mass, so he converted. Because it was under a Catholic king, the League left. Henry entered France because France was tired of the war and just wanted it to end. As long as he was Catholic, they simply didn't want to fight another war. He entered Paris and was crowned King Henry IV of France. Almost everyone was tired of the war after 30 years of intermittent warfare, and all the major Catholic leaders were hardliners. Catholics were dying, and there was no one left to continue the war, so there was no war after that, especially after he issued the Edict of Nantes, which allowed Protestants freedom of worship. Despite the concerns of some Catholics, he remained on the throne for so long that the people felt unbearably calm. The wars ended after nearly a century, and a new king took the throne. Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes and began persecuting Protestants, but one man led the crusade against the king, the Catholic Church, and their power over the French people. Voltaire, the Renaissance in one man,